Hey folks, this is Rhykker with the Diablo 3 Season 27 Necromancer build guide. This guide is for the Trag'Oul Blood Nova Necromancer, which is one of the strongest builds in the game and the strongest Necromancer build in Season 27, thanks to the newly buffed Trag'Oul set. Finally got a rework. Trag'Oul finally lives and honors the name of the lore entity that he represents. And this build does incredible area damage, it's really tanky, and the playstyle is pretty simple. This is one of the builds that I'm considering running in Season 27. The footage you're seeing in the background is a GR140 recorded by Max Roll member and pro player Rob, and you can follow along with the written version of this guide on Max Roll by pro player Wudijo. In this video, we're going to go over the gear, the skills, and the playstyle that you want to rock this build. And it all starts with the Trag'Oul set. The 2-piece bonus makes Blood Rush and Siphon Blood gain the effect of every rune, and your life spending abilities no longer cost essence. 4-piece bonus, while at full life, your healing from skills is added to your max life for 45 seconds, up to 300% more. This quadruples our life. However, it takes a while to build that up. Then the 6-piece. Your life spending abilities deal 10,000% increased damage, and your healing from skills is doubled. So of course we need to benefit from the 6-piece bonus of Trag'Oul's. Other mandatory items include the Blood Tide Blade. Death Nova deals 400% increased damage for every enemy within 25 yards, up to 25 enemies. Now 25 yards is roughly half the distance of your character to the edge of the screen. Your character to the edge of the screen is 50 yards, and this is roughly true in any direction, thanks to the perspective. We're going to want to put this in the cube because we also want a weapon in offhand. We need, first off, the Funerary Pick one-handed scythe. Siphon Blood drains blood from 2 additional targets. Each target takes 300% increased damage from you. Unless there's only one target, then it gains double the increased damage. The bonus from Siphon Blood Power Shift is now 20% per stack and benefits all skills. Now we'll talk about Siphon Blood Power Shift in a bit, but basically this is another 200% damage multiplier. Then we want, in our offhand, the Iron Rose Phylactery. Attacking with Siphon Blood has a 100% chance to cast a free Blood Nova. After cumulatively losing 10% of your max life, your Death Nova deals 50% increased damage for 1 minute, stacking up to 10 times. We'll also need Haunted Visions. This is an amulet that, yes, it makes our simulacrum drain 1% of our max life every second, but that's fine. We're going to be able to get health back really easily with Siphon Blood. The important thing is this makes our simulacrums last forever, unless they die, but you don't have to keep resummoning them, they're not going to time out. And the reason we want simulacrums is because they duplicate our secondary skills. Blood Nova is a secondary skill, so this triples our damage. Next we'll want to take the Crispin Sentence Ring. This is a must-have for almost every Necromancer build. You deal 100% increased damage against slowed enemies, or triple this bonus against enemies affected by any other type of control impairing effect. For example, a stun. This is just too much damage to not leave behind. We'll also want to take a convention of elements. When you're Greater Rift pushing, the gameplay is slower, you can work in your rotation a little more, and it's not a complex rotation. There's not a whole lot of different skills to execute here, but convention gives you a rotating damage buff, 200% damage to a single element, rotating through all the elements that your class can cast. Blood is physical, so we want to make sure that we are dealing our max damage when we are in our 4-second physical rotation. We also want to take the Dainty's Binding Belt. This gives us 50% damage reduction when there is an enemy afflicted by any one of our curses. We'll want to ensure that's all the time. And lastly, we'll want to take in the cube a Mantle of Channeling. While channeling Siphon Blood, you deal 25% increased damage and take 25% reduced damage. Now, while not necessary, we can also work in here 2 pieces of the Oghild set. This reduces damage taken by 15%, increases damage taken by 30%, and the 3-piece bonus reduces damage from elites by 30% and increases damage against elites by 30%. Now, notice we're saying we're taking 2 pieces. That's going to be Shoulders and Bracer, and that's because in our cube we're going to take the Ring of Royal Grandeur. Reduces the number of items needed for set bonuses by 1. This also allows us to have only 5 pieces of Trag'Ouls equipped. Now I'll go over exactly what we want on every piece of gear, but first we'll take a look at the skills. Our main damage skill is Death Nova, Blood Nova. Now, while we're taking Death Nova, we're never actually manually casting it. We're entirely relying on our Iron Rose to trigger it whenever we are casting Siphon Blood. So we're sitting and channeling Siphon Blood, and Blood Novas are emerging. Next, we're taking Siphon Blood, of course. Siphon Blood heals you for 2% of your total health every second while channeled. This counteracts your Haunted Visions, but our 6-piece Trag'Oul is doubling that, so it's actually 4%, and we're also gaining the effect of every rune. So we're going to be pulling in health globes around us. We're going to be applying a slow to enemies, therefore triggering our Crispin's Sentence lower damage effect. We're going to be benefiting from Power Shift, which makes our damage increase by 10% each time damage is dealt, max 10 stacks for 100% increased damage. However, that's doubled thanks to our Funerary Pick, so that's another 200% increased damage. And that damage, again, because of the Funerary Pick, will apply to all of our skills, not just to Siphon Blood. We're also going to gain 19 Essence per second. That doesn't really matter because we're not going to be using Essence. And we're going to benefit from Drain Life, which increases the amount of health restored to 6%, i.e. 12%, so we have an immense amount of sustain with this build. Next, we'll take Frailty, Aura of Frailty. This is a curse that makes any enemy with less than 50% of its health left die. That includes Rift Guardians. Aura of Frailty makes this become an aura so that you don't have to be manually casting it. Enemies that are within 15 yards of you will be automatically under its effects. This build is a short range, not quite melee, but close to melee build. However, the Aura of Frailty's effect is increased by 50% of your gold pickup radius, so you do benefit from stacking that wherever you can. This automatically triggers our Dainty's Binding as well. We're of course taking Simulacrum, and we're going to take Blood and Bone. Simulacrum creates 1 double, Blood and Bone creates 2. This goes from double to triple our damage thanks to our 2 Simulacra buddies casting Blood Nova along with us. Yes, it reduces the duration to 10 seconds, but that doesn't matter thanks to Haunted Visions. Next, we're going to take Blood Rush. This is our mobility skill, and thanks to Trag'Ouls, we're gaining the effect of every rune. The Potency rune doubles our armor for 2 seconds after casting. Transfusion makes us heal for 2% of our max health for every enemy passed through. This is doubled with Trag'Oul. Molting leaves a corpse, but we don't use corpses with this build. Hemostasis removes the blood cost, and Metabolism gives us an extra charge, but doubles the blood cost, but double of 0 is still 0. Lastly, we take Bone Armor Dislocation. Bone Armor gives us armor, but Dislocation stuns enemies for 2 seconds, triggering our Crispin's Sentence super buff. And this is where our small rotation comes in. You just want to ensure that when you are in your physical rotation, that's when you pop your Dislocation, and you ensure you are channeling and therefore doing the maximum damage possible. So again, the playstyle is very straightforward. Just make sure you always have your Simulacra out. Try to group enemies. Because you're an area damage build, you don't want to be fighting a couple enemies at a time. Try to lure enemies together, then sit and channel. Keep up your bone armor at all times. Make sure you have your 10 stacks of bone armor. This lasts for 60 seconds, so you're only forced to renew it once a minute. However, you want to have it ready off cooldown in order to pop it during your physical rotation. For our passives, we want to take Spreading Malediction. This gives us a 1% damage bonus for every enemy that is cursed. We want to be in the thick of a bunch of enemies. They're going to be cursed with our aura. This adds up to a huge damage buff the more in the thick of things we are. We want to take Stand Alone. This gives us a 100% toughness buff, reduced by 10% for each active minion. We'll take Swift Harvesting. This increases the attack speed of Siphon Blood by 15%. That makes us trigger Blood Novas 15% faster. And lastly, we'll take Final Service. This gives you an extra life once every 60 seconds. Now, you'll note that we haven't yet spoken about Sanctified powers. That's the theme of the season. Objects will drop called Angelic Crucibles. These are similar to Ramalani's gifts in that you apply them to an item, and that turns the item into a sanctified item. A sanctified item is re-rolled into a primal, or to have primal stats, and also gains 1 of 3 new legendary powers, depending on your class. Every class has 3 possibilities. Now for the Necromancer, there is a sanctified power that buffs Death Nova. That's the one we will want to go with. Hitting enemies with Death Nova 5 consecutive times adds a spirit that afflicts an enemy every 5th cast of Death Nova, up to 3 spirits can be sent at a time. So again, this is a sanctified power we want to take. We can only have 1 sanctified item equipped at a time. However, it's not that powerful. This build, even without this power, is still very strong. The other 2 sanctified powers don't help us at all. Now, when it comes time to decide what item to sanctify, bear in mind that again, it's going to re-roll the stats randomly, so you're not going to have the same affixes necessarily, but those affixes that it does roll will become perfect ancient. Therefore, you want to prioritize either a weapon in order to get a max weapon damage roll, or an offhand that also has a damage roll, or an item with an important damage multiplier on it, such as a Chrisbin Sentence that has 75 to 100% chance on that legendary effect, getting that 100, very nice. As for exactly what we want on every piece of gear: shoulders, intelligence, vitality, life percent, area damage. This is an area damage build. Helm, intelligence, vitality, crit chance, death nova damage. Note that we're actually not taking a socket here. We don't need cooldown, and we're tanky enough to not need extra life either. For our amulet, physical damage, crit chance, crit damage. Our chest, intelligence, vitality, armor. For the gems we put in our chest and pants, you'll be able to afford to go for damage, therefore go with topazes. If you're feeling squishy, however, or you want more toughness, you can instead go with either rubies or emeralds for more strength or dexterity, which gives you more armor. For your belt, intelligence, vitality, life percent, armor. For your gloves, intelligence, crit chance, crit damage, attack speed. Your bracers, physical damage, intelligence, vitality, crit chance. For your rings, on both crit chance and crit damage, then on 1 attack speed and on 1 area damage. The reason for this: you want to aim for an attack speed between 1.67 and 1.83 attacks per second. So if you're following our recommendations exactly, that means 1 ring has attack speed, 1 doesn't. But otherwise, if you want to arrange yourself, just ensure that you hit between that attack speed breakpoint. For your pants, intelligence, vitality, armor. Boots, intelligence, vitality, armor, death nova damage. For your weapon, intelligence, percent damage, area damage. And your offhand, intelligence, crit chance, area damage, death nova damage. For your legendary gems, Bane of the Trapped. This gives us a damage buff against crowd-controlled enemies and emits a crowd-controlling aura. Great damage buff. We'll take a Zaeith's Stone of Vengeance. Damage you deal is increased by 16% for every 10 yards between you and the enemy hit, max 80% increase at 50 yards, and a 20% chance to stun the enemy for 1 second. So while enemies will be relatively close to us, we're still benefiting from at least a small damage buff, and the stun will further trigger your Chrisbin Sentence. However, if you're feeling squishy, you can instead go with an Invigorating Gemstone. Each hit done increases healing received for 5 seconds, stacking up to 10 times, and makes you immune to control impairing effects. And lastly, you'll want to take a Bane of the Stricken. Each attack you make against an enemy increases the damage it takes from your attacks, and you deal 25% increased damage against Rift Guardians. This build is not good against single targets. It is really good at dealing with huge swaths of enemies. Rift Guardians will be tough. They're gonna take long. Bane of the Stricken is very important for pushing with this build. For speed content, however, if you're doing speed greater rifts, you would swap this out for a Bane of the Powerful instead. Bane of the Powerful gives you a 20% damage buff for 2 minutes after killing an elite pack. As long as you're maintaining 100% uptime on your Bane of the Powerful, then you can stick with it. If it's dropping, then you go to a Bane of the Stricken. You also, with the Bane of the Powerful, deal 15% increased damage against elites and take 15% less damage from elites. Now, as you're building up, before you are too high in Paragon, instead of Aughilds, you can go with 2 pieces of the Guardian set, newly buffed this season. 2-piece bonus makes you gain double your base strength, dexterity, intelligence, and vitality from equipped items. And the 3-piece gives you melee damage reduction based on how much vitality you have on your items, and gives you missile damage reduction based on how much intelligence you have on your items. The reason you make this change is because the higher you go in Paragon, the more intelligence you're stacking just from Paragon. Guardian scales off the intelligence and vitality on your gear. So the more intelligence you have from Paragon, the less you benefit from extra intelligence from Guardians, relative to other stats you could have. Now, if you're doing speedruns, there's A couple other changes you can make in addition to swapping to the Bane of the Powerful. A good item to use would be Steward's Greaves. These give you double move speed for 10 seconds after casting Blood Rush. You can also opt to drop Dainty's Binding, and instead take 2 pieces of Guardians, Belt, and Bracer. With speedruns, we need less toughness, so we're squeezing in some more damage here. For our follower, we're going to take the Enchantress. We'll give her the Smoking Thurible. This is the token that makes her invulnerable. Then for her skills, we take Temporal Pulse for the slow, Amplification for the elemental damage, Powered Shield for the damage reduction and armor, and Focus Mind for the attack speed. For her gear, the important pieces are Nemesis Bracers. This emanates to us when we click on a pylon that will spawn an enemy champion. Flavor of Time emanates to us. Pylon effects last twice as long. Oculus Ring. When an enemy dies, there's a chance to create a golden pool on the floor, stand in it, and you deal 85% increased damage. Give her some Ice Climber boots to make her immune to freeze and immobilize effects. And then otherwise, you want to be focusing on giving her intelligence. Her abilities scale off of intelligence. This maxes out at 25,000 intelligence. Because of that, giving her pieces of the Guardian set can make it easier for you to hit that max intelligence threshold. For our Paragon points, we want to max out move speed. Then invest into Vitality until we have about 800,000 life. Feel free to go further if you're feeling squishy. Then dump into Intelligence. For offense, attack speed, crit damage, crit chance, cooldown reduction. For defense, armor, life percent, all resist, life per second. For utility, area damage, very important, life per hit, resource cost reduction, and pickup radius. And that's going to wrap up this build guide. But do stay tuned for our top 10 builds of Season 27, and check out the other build guides we have for the other classes that have gone up in the past couple of weeks. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider pledging on YouTube or Patreon, and unlocking behind-the-scenes content, monthly virtual hangouts, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykkers Raiders for more Diablo content.